everyone. I'm Bhavna from People Matters, and we are back with another exciting review session in partnership with Darwinbox. It's how to slingshot growth by making employees the strategies and uncover solutions that to effectively shift to the school and curb attrition. With this webcast, we will cover what is the biggest benefit for the management, what are some of the ways employee own performance, employees own their performance, is there a need for a hybrid approach, and what are some of the performance tools and frameworks. Darwinbox. Namrata Gill leads the corporate HR for employees at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. An expert in the area of talent management and analytics, she has spearheaded various projects in areas of HR strategy, employer branding, and organization design. A seasoned professional, a seasoned HR professional with over 20 years of experience, Namrata has worked with leading brands such as Mahindra and Mahindra, Philips, and many more. Himanshu leads customer success function at Darwinbox. He has cross-functional experience of more than 10 years across HR consulting, product development strategy, marketing, and operations. An ex-Nara alumnus, Himanshu has worked for organizations like EY and the Tata Group. Hi Namrata, hi Himanshu. Welcome to today's session.
Hi, Bhavna.
Hello.
Great.
We've saved time for all questions from our attendees at the end of this podcast. Sorry?
Am I audible?
We've saved time for questions from all of our attendees at the end of the podcast. For those who are live, you can post your questions at any time during the session in the comment section page. We will try to respond to as many questions as time allows. We have an exciting topic to discuss today in the webcast. So without any further delay, let me invite Himanshu to take over. Over to you, Himanshu.
Thanks, Bhavna, and welcome everybody to the webinar. Thanks, Namrata, for joining us today. Really looking forward to learn from all your experiences. We have worked with giants like ITC, Philips, Mahindra, and now with DRL. So really looking forward to your experiences and learning from you on this session. What I'll be doing is I'll be sharing my screen and a presentation. So just allow me a minute. And while we go through this presentation, Namrata, I'll be calling on you to share your experiences and we'll have specific questions for you. And that is how we'll go through the webinar. So just to, talk about our experiences and having powered more than 200 plus leading enterprises, one of the key things that, again, I have seen and also when I have talked to HR leaders across, have observed that one of the key problem statements for enterprises today is performance management. What is the right performance management for my organization? And not only for HR leaders, it is also the burning question for CXOs. Be it a traditional organization or a new age organization, say a Arvind or say a Mintra, be it a sales focused organization or a manufacturing organization, be it a startup or be it an organization that has been there for ages, everyone is really dealing with this question. And we just went back and did some research. There is this research by CEB which quotes that over the past couple of years, what is the major focus area for HRs have been performance management system, and 81% of HR leaders have made changes to the existing performance management system but have not really realized the impact, and only 18% of HR leaders feel that they have made a difference in terms of the changes. Namrata, just wanted to hear from you on this and understand what has been your experience with performance management system when you have been working with the likes of DRL and Mahindra and other organizations where you have been pretty much forming policies and driving them?
So it's a great question, Himanshu, because the experiences have start varying with time and performance management has started evolving. I like to go back to what you mentioned in your slide on the objective of performance management. So, objective of performance management is twofold. One is to, of course, improve individual performance, but also about leading to better business performance of the organization. The evidence has rather been weak that uh, performance management system has either A, improved individual performance, B, improved organization performance. This has been my experience, though different systems and different processes, but this has been my experience. So I agree with your slide here.
Mhm. Great. Namrata, just one additional question. And while we were researching on this topic, and what we really found is we have been doing a tug of war between accountability and development. And if you look at this particular slide, primarily what has happened is over a period of time, earlier when we started, the first time when US military really started the merit rating system, the prime focus was on differentiating basis the achievements and putting accountability. And then there was a push towards development where when there was a lag in the talent supply chain, people were really looking to develop talent within the whole focus of performance and the primary objective shifted to development. And over the recent last decade, and starting from 2011, when Kelly Services dropped appraisal system, post ranking system went away, there has been a lot of focus towards development. Again, from this perspective, how have you seen things changing for traditional organizations, especially for Dr. Reddy's and Mahindra and likes of those in your experience?
So Himanshu, I hate being labeled as traditional organization in a way. I think we are more progressive than traditional, but in any way. So coming back to your question, I think the focus has been more development because you cannot introduce any system that doesn't motivate the employee to follow it. So the mere accountability comes in many different ways, but the focus of performance management is development more than accountability these days. I completely agree with them. So it's about what are you doing for the company, and it is also about how is company contributing to my growth. So the focus on individual has been more, and when the focus on individual has been more, accountability is a smaller fraction than development. So your slide talks about the latest trend, and it is critical for all progressive organizations in there, right?
Great, Namrata. So, Namrata, first of all, my apologies for calling your
No.
organization operations as traditional. Uh, but just to bring out one fact, and where I really wanted to understand a bit more from the organizations which are again really giants, when you're trying to do a change of this sort, where it has to be more development oriented, where we were coming from a say a GE age where it was mass production and everyone there was a force ranking, driving those kind of changes, how was it really done, driving from accountability to more development oriented?
So, 3 points here, Himanshu, on the question that you're asking. First is that we calculated how many man hours we are spending on a process that actually is not yielding results. So, when we
Mhm,
calculate man hours, it came to 75,000 man hours were being spent in the normalization and the related processes. So then we see what is the ROI? How are these hours spent? So one way was to go with heuristics and anecdotal evidence. Second was to go with real empirical data. So we resolved
mhm,
to the latter. We saw the empirical data itself said 70,000 hours are spent and nobody is getting motivated, right? It is
mhm,
not like after performance management, your rating is delivered, your performance significantly improves, right?
mhm,
Then we wondered what are people looking for. So we did another insight, and this time we went through a chatbot to get an insight. How are the people feeling? What are they looking for? So
mhm,
why we are looking for career growth, we are giving them ratings, and ratings is neither benefiting the organization, the normalization of ratings is neither benefiting the organization nor
Mhm,
benefiting the business. So it
mhm,
is because I did normalization, my share prices increased, right? So there
mhm,
wasn't any sort of a relevant correlation there.
mhm,
Then what are people looking for? Why can't we do them where each one holds himself or herself accountable in the process?
mhm,
Hence, so that was a very big realization. And to answer your question, how was the change perceived? When we are taking out negativity from the system, when we are giving them more freedom and more empowerment in their hands, I think it's very easy to bring out that change. The other kind of change, when we are depriving them of something, is very difficult. So this it's a very win-win situation, and it's almost like that eureka moment. Why didn't I think about it before?
mhm, mhm. Great.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where, Namrata, we come to the question for the day, where, as you very rightly put in, you evaluated the effort versus the output. You talked about 75,000 man hours really going into normalization and not leading to a real output. Uh, and we have lately started hearing employee-owned performance management system. And again, we have toyed with multiple ideas in performance management system, be it a balanced scorecard, be it management by objectives, be it a continuous feedback to drive growth and development. And lately, we have talked about employee-owned performance management system. Really wanted to understand your views and in terms of employee-owned performance management system. And I come to the first question here for you. Uh, what do you really mean by employee-owned performance management system? Are there certain attributes that can be employee-owned and certain attributes that can be controlled by organization?
So I like to take a step back, right? And when
Mm-hmm,
I highly like to perform, when I like, so the if you go to this whole what motivates employees, there's this whole TED talk and also a book by Daniel Pink, which talks about three things that employee looks for:
mm-hmm,
autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? So
right.
let's assume that purpose is a given and everybody has their own purpose, but mastery and autonomy. If
Mm-hmm,
I have freedom to deliver the results the way I want, and when
mm-hmm,
however, I am the only one responsible, right?
mm-hmm,
I will be highly motivated. And if you see the motivation and outcome, they're very correlated. So,
mm-hmm,
one part. The second part from literature, if you see the human motivation theory, the second part is if my workplace is not about, I am not about what I do, but who I get to be. So these
mm-hmm,
things clearly point out to the autonomy that an employee is looking for. And if you see
mm-hmm,
all of the HR processes that we design, performance management system gives the least autonomy to a person, to an employee.
mm-hmm,
So what
mm-hmm,
can we do? The To answer your question, balanced scorecard, Hoshin Connery, policy deployment, or management by objectives, this is not a either or situation, it is an and situation. Can we
mm-hmm,
have the can we have the KPIs? Can we have the results? Can we be objective? Can we have the balanced scorecard in place and yet give employee ownership of their performance?
mm-hmm,
And when you say performance is what you achieve and how you achieve it, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Tell employee that we are looking at both the aspects, what you achieve and how you achieve, but it's up to you. And you take a feedback when you want to and what you want to. But we want to give you a feedback. So we are not saying you give a feedback after 6 months, you give your feedback after 4 months. Whenever you think you are in a milestone, whenever you are stuck up, whenever you need, you come back with the feedback. So in a way,
mm-hmm,
I drive at the pace I want, at the time I want. So
mm-hmm,
employees want that kind of empowerment at any point. Now, coming back to answering the question, the last aspect of this is the social system. This is
mm-hmm,
a mass customization. I want my Facebook page, my LinkedIn page, and my Instagram page the way I want. I want
mm-hmm,
Netflix whichever movie I want, when I want, and how much I want. So,
Mm-hmm.
when you are encountering this kind of freedom in all your spaces, you would want that in performance. And the
Mm-hmm.
moment you bind them down, they would repel against the system, and it will be a lot of disengagement for the organization. So, this
Mm-hmm.
always bring it up, and this will always give a greater freedom of choice to them. So in a way, you are giving it in the hand of employees, you are empowering them to do when and how they want to do it. And my fundamental personal belief is trusting people, they always do the right thing.
Great. So, Namrata, just being the devil's advocate here, and I mean, we have heard of theory X and theory Y both. While I agree with you that yes, in today's day and age, the more empowerment you give to employees, the more they deliver. But being the flag bearer also of the business performance, in terms of aligning every individual's performance to business performance, as you rightly mentioned in the beginning of the webinar. How do you ensure that that control still exists when there is an employee-owned performance management system? Because you can empower everyone, but everyone being aligned in the right direction and really fighting towards the right cause, how do you bring that alignment and that amount of control while balancing the empowerment?
So I think let's go break down performance management into different parts. So let's break them for six different parts,
Mm-hmm.
right? The first part of the performance management is organization objectives, which is, let's say, an organization scorecard or a balanced scorecard for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's done by the business, right? So that is done by the business. The organization decides depending on shareholders' expectation of growth, the business strategy of the organization. Then
Mm-hmm.
translating the business scorecard into individual goals.
Mm-hmm.
Goal setting process is not as democratic as we would like because the organization objectives are being set. You have a role to play, and therefore you have the KPIs, and you agreed to play that role. There are KPIs associated with that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Will not be so much democratic as the other processes in the organization. Now, once the goal has been set and targets have been agreed,
Just sorry to interrupt here, Namrata. Just wanted to understand. So you're saying that goal setting should be a discussion between manager and the employee, and not completely owned by the employee themselves.
so goal setting, I think, is a mutual process, but goal
Mm-hmm.
setting is two parts. One is
Mm-hmm.
understanding what the goal is. Second is employee. So second part, which we call as pulse conversation, is employee goes to the manager and say, if this is what expected of me, this is what I need. So that way,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of through these pulse conversations, you are giving a lot of freedom to the employee,
Mm-hmm.
giving it in the employee's hand. Okay, this is what we agreed as my goals. However, I don't have ABCD. Please give me ABCD. So, in fact, the power here by having these pulse conversations, you're giving power to the employee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So that is where I'm saying that it is an employee-owned goal-setting process that where
Okay.
is getting power from the. Does it
And
answer?
still, yeah, and still the targets flow from the organizational objectives, right? And that is the control that you're keeping from an organization and aligning to business.
So I don't think we should call it control, Himanshu. I think
Okay.
what I would like to call it is that employees' contribution towards organization objectives. So
Okay.
employee decides that this is the role, not the employee. That is a role-based objective. The role
Mm-hmm.
decides this role has to contribute so much to this process in the organization. And the
Fair enough.
role targets are then discussed between employee and manager. The employee says, if this is what is expected of me, you need to
Mm-hmm.
give me ABCD. Like, I need more resources, I need more budget, I need more freedom, I need a different location, I need a better travel plans, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
that is
Okay.
something. Yeah.
So again, a related
Sorry.
thing, Namrata, when we
Sure.
are actually, sorry,
Go.
uh, Yeah, go on, Namrata.
No, I was saying that when I was explaining the process, I think when I said goal setting, the two parts are very important in a
Mhm.
nutshell. Please carry on.
Right. Okay. So I would just move and understand the implementation. So we have understood what you really mean by employee-owned performance management system. But when we actually look at implementing it in an organization. And again, when I look at how we have been doing it in the past and how we are transitioning out and focusing more on development, there are few questions which I really wanted to understand. The first one is, and we have already answered, how do we align individual and org goals? But how do you really reward performance basis an employee-owned performance management system? Because the differentiation element is kind of taken out.
Hmm. Yeah.
So how would you really go about it and do it in an organization?
So I think first of all, it's very important to understand what is performance management systems applications.
Mm-hmm,
Management system has basically four major application. One is in the compensation, which is your variable pay and increment, right? For the
mm-hmm,
organization. Second is talent, where you are based on what kind of performance you are doing, what role would be more suitable for you, right?
mm-hmm,
Third is engagement, what kind of performance management you had and what kind of engagement you had. Fourth is development, right? These are the
right,
four that you're used for. I think in your
mm-hmm.
question you're asking is more on around compensation. How will we
Yeah.
differentiate?
To start with
Yes.
compensation, and the next question would be on all the downstream feeds, as you rightly mentioned, be it career succession planning, be it engagement, be it development. How do you really manage all these activities linked to performance in an employee-owned performance management system?
So once the performance has been evaluated, all the goals, how a person did it, when they did it, how they did it, how much actively a manager was involved, then let's say the company decides that at the end of the year, they want to
Mm-hmm,
give an increment to an variable pay to an employee based on performance for past year. Now,
mm-hmm,
and the employee have a conversation, and
mm-hmm,
based on the conversation, the manager knows that this employee exceeded or did not exceed the expectation. And let's say
mm-hmm,
manager has five employees. He's given a kitty of the money that he owns, and he
mm-hmm,
decides that since his team has exceeded target, which person made him do the most. Basically,
mm-hmm,
the freedom to differentiate is given to the manager
mm-hmm,
without labeling it as a rating, without spending a lot of time. And I
mm-hmm,
think the main key to success is the quality of people manager here.
mm-hmm,
While we have been circumventing it and we have been compensated through the processes, but
mm-hmm,
actually the way to do it is through the quality of discussions and quality of people management. So what we have done is we have labeled employees, we have made mathematical equations. While it is not all science, there's a part of art here also, and you have to
mm-hmm,
trust the manager and empower the manager when you're also empowering the employee. In the end, manager is an employee, right? So
mm-hmm.
freedom to the manager, not to be given a formula, but to make a decision that to compensate his employees, his or her employees. Yeah.
And I think you have hit the nail on its head, Namrata, when you say people management is key and core. Again, help me understand from your experience, how have you really been able to achieve it? Because the major challenge I have seen across organization is they do a lot of training for managers on performance management, how to give feedback, and how to really manage, say, a employee-owned performance management system in terms of continuous conversations, continuous feedbacks. But are not being really impactful and again result oriented. So how have you really enabled your managers to do it? Are there any secret, is there a secret sausage, so to say, if you can share
Yeah.
that with us?
So, three important things, Himanshu. The first one here is that You need to have a continuous sensing tool in the organization, which actually senses whether managers are actually having the conversations or not. Because
Mm-hmm.
manager not to have a conversation, it would be very easy. Initially, to manage the change, you would have to have the sensing conversations, sensing checks and balances to see that the conversations are having. Second, which is
Mm-hmm.
more difficult thing for my function, especially in HR, is that letting go. That this process
Mm-hmm.
is owned by the employee and by the manager, and HR doesn't have to give them formulas and HR doesn't have to control it. The moment managers know that they are accountable for the performance of their employees, they need to have the conversation, they need to set the goals, and they need to inform it. Traditionally, in an organization, what used to happen is somebody used to get a rating and said, "Oh, I gave you a better rating, but HR made me do normalization." That conversation is out of the table. That conversation is not putting up. Second is the end product is that employee gets development inputs and a career discussion is held. So when you focus
Mm-hmm.
on my career, it takes away all the negativity from the discussion and it turns out to be future focused, um, positive, well intentioned discussion in the organization. So this is really helpful. These three things I think have played a great role in the organization to see. Quality of people managers, and I want to spend a minute here. I think
Mm-hmm.
what is defining what is in it for them. Why people management is not everybody's thing. So you need to have a lot of encouragement and a little bit of consequence management. For example, my sensing tool is showing red at many areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
That for a manager. Then that kind of a conversation needs to be also important. When you're managing,
Mm-hmm.
take a little bit of consequence management would help. But my personal belief is things come with a great sense of encouragement and a great sense of recognition for good people management discussions between the manager and employee. It really makes your playing level playing field so much easier and so much easier to implement. You can't change your managers overnight, but
Mm-hmm.
you can encourage and reward and recognize the right behaviors and
Mm-hmm.
to have some sort of a I won't say a greater consequence, but some sort of a consequence management in place if it's not happening. For example, one of the things would be that if I'm getting a lot of reds for a manager who's not having a discussion, maybe it's a good idea not to give him people management responsibilities. Maybe, perhaps.
So, when I really like the statement you made, Namrata, when you said you can't change your people managers overnight, but you will have to recognize and reward the real behaviors to ensure that this culture is built in the organization. And that is where I just want to understand from you three tips for the people who have joined us and someone who wants to shift from a traditional performance management system to a more employee-owned performance management system. As a starter, and I take the first point will be recognize and reward the right behaviors in people managers. But what would be the two other starting points for people who are trying to shift from a traditional performance management system to a more employee-owned performance management system?
The three things that worked for us for change management is that business ownership, it is very traditional and cliche to say, but when you're
Mhm,
introducing the new performance management, HR doesn't need to do it. It's a business who needs to go and introduce that.
mhm,
Once the buy-in is there, the business should go and introduce there. A second thing is the IT system. The IT system should work for you. So if
mhm,
you have a great process but a bad system, people are going to hate you for it. So the system should be flexible, the system should be configurable, and
mhm,
the process will may also call for a new system, sometimes traditional system. Don't do it. I know it's the last thing which I thought will really work is the process should take care of it. It should not be people dependent. For example, regular pulse checks should be configured in your process so that you
mhm,
know that now the time has come to do pulse checking, and now I do
Mhm.
not need to go. Now I don't need to go and ask somebody to do something. Um, the last thing is that the empowerment and freedom and the removing of negativity has to be well campaigned and publicized. For
Mhm.
example, we started a campaign, and I just want to give you an idea. We started a campaign called Right to Feedback.
Mhm.
So each employee has got a right to feedback. So have you exercised your right yet? So I thought it really went well.
Can you elaborate on this right to feedback a bit more, Namrata? Was it an employee thing or was it a manager thing? How was it really structured?
So we told all employees that you have a right to your feedback. So
Mm-hmm.
you to ask for a feedback. If you haven't gotten it, it's your fundamental right. It's like a constitutional right. So you
Mm-hmm.
ought to get a feedback, and you ought. The second campaign was the quality of feedback. So the but right to feedback campaign was for the employees who we said that you have a right to get a feedback, and you should exercise your right to get a feedback in many more than one ways, right? And have you exercised your right? Somebody
Mm-hmm.
has said you're right. So we got a lot of instances, and it was one of the most loved campaigns. And rather than, you said employee owned, so this made it
Mm-hmm.
employee. Give me my feedback. Why haven't you given me my feedback? So those were the conversations rather than I have to give you a feedback.
Great, great. Uh, Really, one great takeaway for me, Namrata. Right to feedback campaign.
I'm just trying
Thanks
to
for
convince you. I'm just trying to convince you about how progressive we are.
And Namrata, I am convinced. I
Okay.
apologize for my the use of the word. Yeah, I apologize for that, but I'm convinced
No, no,
nonetheless.
just
So,
yeah.
Namrata, and before moving on, I just wanted to ask one question, and that is more like the elephant in the room, which many of us do not address. But I just wanted to take your opinion and views on it. We have talked about multiple times delinking rewards and compensation from performance management system, and that is where when really the tug of war is between accountability and development. What is your view? Can we at some point of time de-link performance management and rewards, or in your view it should coexist and it will coexist?
So, if I were to divide my question into two parts, the first part is that rewards are an integral part of your performance. I expect to be rewarded for my hard work in the past year. But the second part is how would I be rewarded for future? So, here's the thing I want to say. The bonuses or the variable pay or performance pay is the past, right? So you
Right.
need to wait for the goals that you have delivered in the past. So this is
Mhm.
something that is agreed with you in your compensation, and there has to be a logic to the variable part of your compensation. So
Mhm.
that taken care. However, more and more organizations are talking about having a variable pay at all levels. Does it make a difference to put it and everything? So this is something that is absolutely taken care. So that should be a part of performance. However, some of the organization I see are basing their increments on the performance, and I
Mhm.
think more and more I see compensation science and where it is tilting towards. I think they're very market based increments. So increments should be based on the market parity and the
Mhm.
integrity that you have in the organization, and they can be totally delinked with performance. However,
Okay.
performance pay, because it's a part of your CTC, you've agreed on the objectives by which you'll be measured, it will still be a part of your the compensation will still be linked with the that part. So future compensation will not be linked with the performance pay. Past compensation, which I promised to you in the past, would be linked with the compensation.
Okay, great. So, Namrata, again, I wanted to understand from you, and we talked about business objectives right up front. Um, we have seen, again, in my experience, I have seen organizations when they say they want to move to a more employee owned performance management system, people talk about greater employee engagement. I have heard multiple of my clients talking about, say, employee taking a BHAG target. They're taking larger targets than what have been given by the organization, and hence driving organizational performance. What, in your view, would be the real metrics to measure whether employee-owned performance management system is succeeding in an org or is not so much of a success?
Uh, Himanshu, I got a little lost in the question, so I'll tell you what I am answering, and then you can add the second part.
Okay.
So I'm saying that how do you know that employee-owned performance management system, the targets are in line with the business objectives, are stretched enough, right?
Uh, so yes, that is one part of the question, Namrata. But what I
Mhm.
really want to understand is if, for example, we have a traditional performance management system and we want to empower our employees a little more and we want to move to employee-owned performance management system, and when I say we, it is an organization, uh, how would it measure whether the movement to an employee-owned performance management system is really bearing results? Is it
Oh,
basis business
yeah.
performance? Is it basis employee engagement or something else? And how have you experienced it?
So I think it's a very good question. How would you measure the effectiveness of the system and also the efficiency of this? So,
Right.
so first is that you can. What I would suggest organizations do is they do a pilot with the BU.
Mm-hmm.
So to fire bullets before you fire cannonballs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I first thing is to do a pilot. Let's say you take a small part of the business. Let's say you take the retail business and you say this is how we are going to drive it.
Mm-hmm.
See whether the business objectives have been met or exceeded
Mm-hmm.
vis-a-vis other part of a similar organization. So that is the way you measure the business outcomes. Second is, of course, there's an immediate feedback that you take from an employee. That is a lag indicator.
Mm-hmm.
However, you need to measure around four things here. First is how your high performance is feeling. Remember, if you
Mm-hmm.
do one shoe fit all engagement measurement, it won't work. So, are
Mm-hmm.
high performers motivated to contribute more? That is one
Mm-hmm.
measurement. Are you able to identify your bottom performers and what you need to do with them? That is the second measurement. The time and energy spent by the organization and the cost organization incurs for that. That is
Mm-hmm.
the measurement. And fourth measurement is your engagement and retention. So these are the four measurements that you should do. But my simple advice is that measure your pilot well. Do
Mm-hmm.
and measure it well before you go on and launch a big cannonball in the organization. So, and
And
when we started doing it, just one more example I want. When we started doing it, we did it with we when we did it with most people in the organization, because whether you like it or not, senior management people take a lot of energy in the organizations. Once you get them out of the way, this was a pilot for 200 people.
mm-hmm.
We did it. Then it becomes very easy because these are the leaders. They've got a buy-in and they'll run for you.
And actually, yeah, that's one of the better ways to, in my view, to do it. Once you have the buy-in of business and especially the senior leaders, this will be greatly top-driven and really reinforces. So, Namrata, just another follow-up question on this. I mean, what do you think is the ideal time? Like, one cycle is enough, or do you want to run a couple of cycles before you come to the measurement? Because if you look at the measurement metrics that you said, motivation, engagement, and attention, it is a lag indicator and might take some time to really show the real effect. So, would you recommend one cycle? Would you recommend two cycles, or maybe a couple more?
So I would recommend pilot for one cycle. But
Mhm.
with the pilot, you put your all energies behind the pilot. You communicate it well, you measure it well, you come back with a lot of initiatives, do them, detail it out very well. So pilot
Mhm.
should be done for one cycle, but you once you're convinced your pilot is yielding results, then you should wait for 2 cycles for the entire organization. So
And
pilot is extremely important to do, and especially in something which affects all the employees all the time, which employ may affects their compensation, which affects their rating, which affects their self confidence and morale. I think pilot is the answer to doing it, but pilot has
Mhm.
done in a deep dive manner and with a lot of time and energy spent on it, so that you
Mhm.
don't have to do it again. And then retention should be measured over not 2 but actually 3 years of a system.
Mhm.
Uh, the first year you don't know whether it's the system or the external condition. Second year you have a hypothesis, and third year is when you get to test it completely.
Okay. Um, so Namrata, just wanted to understand here, and I'm just trying to also go back to the point that you made that you should do a pilot. Did you also get the feedback of the people who participated in the pilot, or was it only lag indicator measures to improve the process as we go forward?
So Himanshu, what we did is we did a design thinking approach here.
Mhm.
And taking a survey of feedback in itself, what we did was we went over design thinking principles and we did deep dive interviews for 3 hours with a lot of people.
Okay.
So also understood, and we had cue cards, and we had when did they motivated. We even lived their life for a day when they got a feedback. We
Mhm.
went very deep into few people. While it was
Mhm.
not statistically valid sample size, but the insights we had were humongous. For example,
Mhm.
the employee came and told us it's so good that I somebody asked me how I achieved my goals.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes when I don't meet a target, they say, "Oh, it's all about outcome. It's not about the effort." But the how part is actually very important when the organizers bring it up. So I think it was really good to do the design thinking and getting a feedback through the design thinking lens. It opened our eyes. It really opened our eyes. So
Great.
I think that was very objective way of getting a feedback. While it was not scientific, design
Mhm.
thinking is not a science yet, or it's not classified as a science. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Right. Namrata, you mentioned the real, one of the key success parameters for employee-owned performance management system to be technology. And really wanted to understand the bits and pieces of where technology has helped you in your pilot and going forward, how technology is really enabling you in terms of really making a performance management system employee-owned.
So I think technology plays a great part. People don't understand process, but people understand technology. If I were to explain to them the process, it'll take me years. But if the process is systematically run through technology, I think
Mhm.
it the technology people use has to be mobile enabled. So you cannot have a technology on a desktop while they
Mhm.
use Instagram on their phones. So
Mhm.
technology has to be, I think technology is simplification. In olden
Mhm.
days, when SAP used to be the king, right? We did
Mhm.
everything on SAP and people had to spend days and days learning technology. So
Mhm.
technology has to be intuitive. And in my
Mhm.
view, the UX part, the user interface,
Mhm.
is the key, right?
Mhm.
Simplification is the key, but user interface is the key. So there
Mhm.
should not be any extra features. There should be just what an employee needs. It should be that simple. It should be yes or no. And imagine if a feedback was drop down of 20 statements and you could pick up a statement that fits the best, or if you want to write it, you could write it.
Mhm.
Everybody would give a feedback. Everybody would give a feedback. Remember when Uber asks for a feedback if you've been overcharged or has been cancelled, they give you multiple options.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
should be as simple as that. So I don't need to be trained to use Uber. I don't need to be trained to use Instagram. I don't need to
Mhm.
be trained to watch Netflix. Why should I be trained on a system? It has to be that simple. And I strongly advocate mobile enabled, great user interface, all these qualities. A lot of design principles have to go in.
Completely agree with you there, Namrata. I mean, one thing that again we have been focusing and we have been talking multiple times is mobile-enabled systems, especially when we talk about continuous check-ins, like a
Yeah.
continuous feedback. It has to be mobile-enabled, and again, you know that there are multiple things coming in, especially with voice-enabled feedbacks, so that you don't have to type in and all of those. But I have just one disconnect here, Namrata, and I just wanted to understand your perspective. And we have been hearing this a lot in terms of how simplified Uber can be. And while that is the aspiration, one of the questions that we always have in mind is that performance might be a little more complicated than giving a one line feedback, and hence we should give that flexibility and not a drop down. But really want to hear your views a little more on, I mean, how much should you control and guide someone versus giving them the openness to express whatever they want? Because also, I mean, we are a believer of the nudge theory. We don't want to nudge people on performance and rather let them give their open feedback. So, wanted to hear your views around this.
So here is my views that we did an experiment with a controlled group by giving them freedom to write what they want, and another control group by giving them drop down and
Mm-hmm,
freedom to write.
mm-hmm,
Uh, all the 10 people finished it on time and gave a feedback in addition to the drop down. But the people we had given them to write, they hesitated, they took longer, and some of them did not complete. So I think we have to design a process that works for you. So if the
mm-hmm,
process is working, if it is complicating the whole things, so you should also give an optional if you want to add anything, but a drop down and the freedom is greatly respected. And if you
okay.
ask my all Asia colleagues on the chat how much they have to run over people to complete their appraisal, to complete their goal setting, and employee doesn't fill up, and then they don't do it in the system. So system has to mimic real life, right? If I'm having a
Mm-hmm,
conversation, if I can put something there, it works, right? When you call up a bank,
mm-hmm,
sometimes you can't get to the operator, you have to go to the machines, and machines we do
right.
that. And perform
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
more simple. I don't agree with you that it's complicated. It's much more simple
mm-hmm,
than the ride.
mm-hmm,
Good, you give a feedback, then there is a drop down. Do you want to give a compliment? Then they ask you what you want to write, right?
mm-hmm,
Why
mm-hmm.
can't life be as simple as that? I
Right,
love
and
Uber. You and I
you
love
asked a
Uber.
very, yeah, I do love Uber and Ola as well. I love both of them. But actually, you brought a very good point, Namrata. And while we have not touched on that, I would like to end my line of questioning with that. You mentioned that HR and HR, I mean, all of us have to really follow up multiple times from with business to get things filled up and done. How do you see, I mean, I think employee owned performance management is one step in that direction. How do you see that thing really changing, where we do not have to follow up and things happen on their own when there is an employee owned performance management system?
So I think it will take a while for things to change. So you cannot have this whole country club culture where it's like you do what you want, you go what you want, but in the end we have to make profit, right? So I
Hmm,
think
right.
you sensing thing in between to check how it is going. So you need to have continuous sensing, and your
Hmm,
sensing mechanisms have to be multifold. They could be people, they could be short surveys, they could be mobile enabled, they could be a backend data analysis. So the sensing for the pilot actually helps you a lot. So if you put sensing checks in place, whether it's happening or not, and you have time enough to take a corrective action before a damage is done, I think it works for the first cycle, for the pilot cycle only.
hmm.
Yeah.
Great, great. So that's all from my side, Namrata. I would like to call in Bhavna. Bhavna, you can begin to take over.
Thank you, Himanshu. Thanks, Namrata, for sharing such great insights. We will now be moving on to the questions from one of our attendees. So taking up the first question for the day, we've got Manpreet. She's asking, how do you, if you can share a few tips to make performance management systems more employee-driven, specifically in the manufacturing units.
So in the manufacturing units, the difference here is that employees don't own computers and laptops. But the good part is I've seen 90% of the employees, no matter what level, what location, even shop floor workers have a smartphone. So, and sometimes smartphones are not allowed inside the manufacturing unit due to regulatory and other constraints. So what we do is we put a half an hour specific for performance management where people can go across and we shorten one particular shift on one particular day to 7.5 hours to do this. The other thing that we do in manufacturing unit is that we give a lot of kiosks. We have a lot of kiosks, and we give them the freedom to do it. So in manufacturing unit, we try to make it less cumbersome, less time consuming for the employee, and more freedom. And the last thing we've seen is the local language really helps for shop floor workers. So whatever system you use, you convert it into a local language interface so that it really works for you. So to cut a long story short, first is mobile, as much as possible smartphone enabled. Second is kiosk. Third is finding time from the shifts so that the production doesn't suffer. And fourth point is explaining to them in the local language. So these are the 4 points that work in a manufacturing unit.
Okay, thank you, Namrata. I believe the next question is for you again. You did mention about sensing tools. So we have Supriya. She's asking, can you share some of the sensing tools that you've used in the system?
Yeah. So, sensing tools, in the system. So, sensing tool could be as important as with the app that you have for the system. You could just ask, how was your quality of feedback? Did you like the feedback that you got? And it could just pop up on your phone the moment you open it or on your desktop. And it could be extremely simple. So, that is the tool that you use, or we have a QR code where you could scan and talk about it. This is technology enabled. The third is in a manufacturing unit, we could just have a random check over lunch table, like how's it going and how's it going, how's the feedback quality and how's it coming up. But the most important point is that using technology and making it so simple that each employee can use it without being threatened. So one of the things that worked for us beautifully is an iPad at iPad kiosk at the lunch table where we just ask people to come randomly punch and go away, and it really gave us a great insight.
Thanks, Namrata. Himanshu, would you like to add something here from a technology point of view? What are some of the sensing tools that people can use in their organizations?
So, from a sensing tool perspective, and again, I'll talk about Darwinbox itself. When you look at any of the methodologies that we use, you can actually circulate a continuous feedback. You can actually roll out a survey. You can do a pulse check. So there are questions that can be popped up to employees where they can respond and say, "Hey, this is working great or not." We have something called Vibe, and you can use that to understand how things are going in terms of conversations. In terms of if you're using, say, a continuous feedback, you can always pull out reports on how many people have done check-ins, how many people have not done check-ins, and really understand. And that is what Namrata was talking about as well, that we need to keep a check of how many managers have done check-ins, how many have not, and then maybe do a reinforcement in some other way. So Darwinbox enables that, and when I'm very sure certain HRMS tool which are really modern and future focused will help in this.
Thank you, Himanshu. So we have a series of questions waiting for more answers. So the next question is, how can we coach baby boomers like managers, existing managers, to become more open and accepting to the more employee-owned performance management system?
Actually, it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I thought it was honestly, I thought it was a cakewalk when the enormity of the problem that we thought what it would be and how it turned out to be. So nobody likes to give a bad news, and if the baby boomers are up there in the organization, they would hate it just as much. So what you're doing is you have to define number one, what are the benefits that they'll get. Second thing is use of systems. Mm, I don't think baby boomers have a specific problem with using the system. I have yet to see a baby boomer, including my dad, who doesn't use a smartphone. So I think they are all using smartphones and at a greater adaptation than we would have thought they would. So once you give them, you simplify life for them, and you take away the conflicts and hard components. I think the communication has to be customizable to what is in it for them. Once you do it well, and that is another thing I wanted to say, we don't have to do carpet bombing, we should do nuclear strikes. So we have to tailor our communication to baby boomers, tailor our communication to Gen Y, millennials, that we do what is in it for them. So once you do that, that comes out as extremely helpful.
And I would just like to add over here, and Namrata very rightly pointed. Even in our implementation, we have not seen such adoption challenges from baby boomers. Yeah, there will be a certain percentage of them, but in fact, they are more excited about it. They want to use it. In fact, it sometimes feels that they are there to prove that, hey, we are not traditional, so to say. We want to use and we want to prove the system. So we have seen adoption from baby boomers much more, in fact, and more questions, more excitement from them than the millennials, so to say.
Yeah, agreed. Could not agree more.
Great. I think as rightly said, I think communication plays a critical role here. Great. So we have the next question from Siddharth. Siddharth wants to know what solution would you propose to maintain the spirit of performance management systems, especially now that the systems are based on shared goals?
It's a very good question where the shared goals between manufacturing and R&D or manufacturing and that. So what we solve this problem is through something we call as hurdles. So before we set the goals, before we take the targets, we do a lot of hurdles where the key stakeholders, for example, let's say in pharma, you're going to manufacture, but the estimate has to come from sales and the know-how has to come from R&D. So what we do in such case that we create something called as huddles. These huddles actually put everybody together in a room where they together with all the empowerment decide what the shared targets or shared goals would be. And once this is done, then it is nicely cascaded down. And what we do, the second thing we do is provide a visibility. Provide a visibility to everybody in the system about everybody else's goals. So once you have a visibility, once you have set the process in motion, the transparency is taken care, the ownership is taken care, and it goes a long way improving. And actually, organization achieves their target at a greater pace.
Perfect. Bhavna, are there any more questions?
Yes, so I think we'll take just one more question for the day. So Supriya has another question asking how are the concerns of a biased feedback addressed in the employee-owned performance management system?
So I think biased feedback is addressed. So, for example, there is always a reviewer. When you give your comments, this is always visible to the reviewer. And second thing is, as I said, one is that rewarding the right behavior, but also consequence management for a biased feedback has to be there in the system. So in a traditional system, and HR and L plus two do a check and balance. In this system, the same system is followed as there, but you look at it, the feedback in a greater detail. In fact, one of the instances I like to point out when a manager had not given unbiased feedback and a very sketchy key feedback on the system. The manager's manager actually called him up and said, "Hey, this doesn't seem right." So basically, rather than giving a number and somebody looking at the number, the manager's manager was able to review in a greater detail what was the expectation and what has been achieved. So to me, this system of giving employer freedom of owning their own performance gives more check and balance than you could just hide yourself behind one rating or one number.
And yeah, I mean, just one point over here, which I wanted to mention. So, Supriya, when you look at the whole premise of employee-owned performance management system, it is open and fair conversations and communication. And this is enabled both ways. So, for example, if a manager is giving a feedback, if at any point of time there is an apprehension that this is a biased feedback or my rating is biased, the grievance redressal mechanism is as stronger, and that's where the organization maintains its control, where employees can come and talk to either the reviewer, that is the skip level manager, or raise it to HR, and that is where HR really steps in to ensure that the control is maintained. So again, the premise is open and fair conversations as much as possible. It is not only in feedback, it is also in challenging the feedback and understanding if there are specific development areas or focus areas for any individual. So Bhavna, I'd
Thank you.
just like to take a minute. Yeah, I'd just like to take a minute to talk about the continuous feedback research that we have done. We have talked about 100 plus Indian organizations and have analyzed around 32,000 plus conversations and have come out with a report on continuous feedback on how organizations can really use it to make a more employee-owned performance management system. The report is available both on our website and request you, Bhavna, to paste the link of the particular report on the chat window so that people who want to go and download can download it. So again, if you are looking at employee-owned performance management system, in my view, one of the key tenets is continuous feedback, and that is the first stepping stone, if I see it right, in terms of driving an employee-owned performance management system. We have seen organizations across sectors using continuous feedback as a first stepping stone and then moving to employee-owned performance management system. So do go through the report and let us know your feedback as well. And also from my end, I just want to thank you, Namrata, for your time and insights. It was a great learning for me, and I'm very sure for all those who have joined in, it was a great learning. Thank you. Thanks, Namrata.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Himanshu and Bhavna, for being an
Thank you
excellent
so much,
host.
Himanshu.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, Namrata.
Thank you.
Great. So we've shared the downloaded report with all of you in the comment section. With this, we come to the end of today's webcast. We would like to thank our webcast partner, Darwinbox, and our speakers, Namrata and Himanshu, for their invaluable input. Please do share your feedback in the survey link provided in the chat section because your input matters. Stay tuned for many more exciting sessions. Thank you and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.